SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol, if poorly configured or left to its defaults, is a very easy way for you and I, or an attacker, to collect tons of information that can be valuable as part of our enumeration process. So we're going to move over to our Windows 10 machine in our lab environment and bring it full screen. And let's talk about some SNMP tools that we might use. The first one I'd like to talk about is kind of old. It's from the Windows 2000 Resource Kit from Microsoft, and it was called snmputil.exe. And it effectively allowed you to manage and work with the SNMP agent that was running on a device. In Microsoft's case, they're thinking that you're going to be working with a Microsoft device running SNMP, but the command would work with any compliant SNMP device. And if we scroll down a little bit, the tool has some SNMP commands like get and get next and walk to request information from an SNMP device. Another tool I'd like to bring to your attention is SNScan. And if you do a Google search for SNScan, as I've done right here, one of the hits is going to be for McAfee, and that's the one you'd want to go ahead and download if you want to work with or play with this tool. I'll be demonstrating that here in just a moment. Now, as far as an industrial strength SNMP management tool is concerned, we have lots of those around as well. One of those is from SolarWinds. Here we've done a search for SolarWinds IP Network Browser, and this hit right here from SolarWinds leads to a download of a evaluation of that product as well. Now, in the interest of time, I have downloaded the SNScan and the IP network browser, and I've installed them, and we'll demonstrate them here in this nugget, but I would also encourage you to also download those and practice with those in your lab environment as well. So let's go ahead and bring up the SNScan. And what I've done here is I simply put my entire range of IP addresses from .1 to .254 on my subnet. I'll click this little button here, and that will add that range of addresses right here for the IP addresses to scan. So we'll click on the arrow to add them over. Here it's also specifying what ports do you want to scan for. 161 is the default for SNMP. 162 would be for traps. So I'm going to leave just the 161 set for now. We can also specify what community string, aka password, we want to try. Or if we have a list of passwords that we want to try, we can click this radio button and browse for that list. That would be more of an example of a dictionary attack using a list of passwords to attempt to break in. So with those in place, all we need to do is click on this little right arrow button to go ahead and launch the scan. And that will scan the entire 192.168.1 network. And look at that. Now, in preparation for this demonstration, I ran the scan and I was surprised to see that my printer is enabled and running SNMP, which I was not consciously aware of. So that's at 100. I've also got a Cisco iOS router at 151 and our Windows 2012 server that's at 212. And based on the tool we used, if we use a bigger, more industrial strength tool, for example, like SolarWinds, it can also scan those devices, and with the correct community string, it can enumerate those devices for us. So for example, on my router R1, if I open up the description where it says 13 new interfaces, there it lists for me all 13 of my interfaces on that router. And we might ask, well, how in the world did it get all that information? Well, it had the community string for read-only, and it basically walked the tree and got all the information from that router, or has the potential to get all the information from that router. And not to be outdone, we also have equivalent SNMP tools in our Kali Linux platform as well. For example, if we go over to our Kali Linux box, which we will right now, so over on our Kali Linux box, we'll bring that full screen and we'll log in. We have several tools that can actually leverage and use SNMP. One of those is Metasploit. We'll have a separate nugget just on Metasploit, but for the purposes of discovering and enumerating SNMP, let me demonstrate a quick example of that for you right now. Under Applications, and if we go down under Exploitation Tools, here we have an option for Metasploit. And actually Metasploit, because it's so flexible, is going to show up in lots of different places. So we'll launch Metasploit, and I'll bring that full screen. And the Metasploit framework is very modular. We can have options and auxiliary modules that we plug in for specific purposes. So for now, I'm going to do a search space SNMP to see what's available regarding SNMP. And the one I'd like to use now, although there's lots of them, is this guy right here. Auxiliary scanner SNMP SNMP_enum for enumeration. So to use that, I'm going to type in use space, and I'm going to copy and paste that entire string right there. So we'll copy it, we'll come down to my command line and paste it in. So we're in Metasploit framework, we're going to use that module, we'll press enter, and this little piece right here indicates exactly what we're using. Now it's very unlikely that we're going to memorize every single feature and function in something like Metasploit framework, but what we can do is we can do a show options and press enter, and that will show us what the current settings are. And we love the defaults. The default community string is public. It has some defaults for number of retries and what the timeout value is. But as far as what hosts it's going to go ahead and use as a target, it doesn't have a value there. So we're going to set the value for that variable called rhosts in uppercase. And to do that, we're going to type in set space rhosts. And then we could put in the IP address of a device we want to learn more about, or we could go ahead and do a range of IP addresses. In this case, let's just pick one IP address. Let's pick 192.168.1. And my iOS router was at .151. In our labs, we could also point to .212 because that's also running SNMP. And in my home environment, I could also point to .100 because that's also running SNMP. So in this example, we'll set it to just one IP address. We'll press enter, and we can use the up arrow key a couple times to show options again. Just make sure all of our settings are like we want them to be. And then to run this, we just type in the command run and press enter. What that's going to do is going to go out and do enumeration based on the module of Metasploit framework regarding all the SNMP information that it can get from that device. So if we scroll back up to the top right after we typed in run, we've got some very valuable information as an attacker. We know the type of router it is, so it's Cisco iOS software. It's a 2801 router. It's running this version of the iOS. It's been up for an hour and 33 minutes and 41.95 seconds. IP forwarding is enabled. It's acting as a router. If we scroll down, there's a section for network interfaces, and there's a whole bunch of interfaces there. And it's including the speed, the MAC address, and the in and out. So based on this output, we know that it's this interface, FA00, that has traffic that's going through it, compared to, for example, Serial 00, which has no bytes in, no bytes out. As we continue to scroll down, it gets better and better. Check this out. The router owns these IP addresses. They're configured on it. And here's the routing table. Fantastic. So it has the routes in the routing table and the next hop to reach those networks. It's also showing us the listening UDP ports, including 161, which is for SNMP, and 162, which is for SNMP traps. It's also got 53 open, which implies it's acting also as a DNS server. Because we have the Windows 2012 server already set up with SNMP as well, let's also do it for that host. So we'll do a show options, and currently we're set to .151, so we'll simply do a set rhosts is 192.168.1.212, which is the IP address of our Windows 2012 server, and then we'll run it again. Fantastic, including tons of services that are running. So if we scroll up on this device, here's information about the hardware, has the system uptime. Here under user accounts, we have guest and administrator. If we created additional users, they would show up here as well. And as we scroll down, it's got information on the network adapters, the routing information, it has information on TCP and UDP listening ports and connections. And as we continue on, it has the network services that are currently running as well, and much, much more. Now, one of the benefits of using tools like Metasploit framework with the SNMP options is that it's giving us information in a fairly organized fashion. If we just want to see, for example, the SNMP object IDs, the raw data, we have tools for that as well. So if we minimize this window and bring up another shell, and let me maximize this as well. There's a tool called SNMP walk as part of Kali Linux. And we'll do a -C to represent the community string we want to use, which is public. And then the IP address of 192.168.1. And let's go ahead and pick on the router at .151 space. And we'll specify the version of SNMP that's currently running on that device, which is version 1. Now, when we press enter, we're going to do a full tree walk of that Cisco router, and the data is going to be flying back at us. So that's tons and tons of pages. If we scroll up towards the top of this output, there's an object ID for the actual title of the router, Cisco iOS software 2801, the version. And if we scroll down further, there's object IDs for various services and features on this device, for example, AAA, BGP, and hundreds of others. So the key takeaway here is that there's several tools, both command line and graphical user interface tools, that can help us enumerate tons of information if we can access the SNMP agents and services that are running on devices in our networks. In this nugget, you and I have discussed and demonstrated several tools that we can use for the enumeration of information based on SNMP. And as a friendly reminder from me to you, I would encourage you to practice everything that we're doing in these nuggets in your own lab environment and have a boatload of fun doing it. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.